A Voyage to Brobdingnag, from Gulliver's Travels by Johnathan Swift. Gulliver's Travels, written by Johnathan Swift, is a 4-part tale. First published in 1726, it depicts the journey of Captain Lemuel Gulliver to strange nations and his peculiar encounters. A Voyage to Brobdingnag constitutes the second part of Gulliver's Travels. Life is a journey, inner and outer. Sometimes both merge. In this extract, Gulliver lands in Borbdingnag, where he is not the largest, but the smallest. Let's see what happens in the land of Borbdingnag. I left Bristol on June 20th, 1702. I sailed with Captain John Nicholas, whose ship was bound for Surat, India. We had clear weather until we reached the Cape of Good Hope. We docked there fresh water, but we ended up spending the winter there, for the ship needed repairs and the captain was ill. We left Africa in spring and sailed around Madagascar into the Indian Ocean. On April 19th, violent winds began to blow, and we were pushed to the east side of the Molucca Islands. On May 2nd, the waters became calm again. But the captain, who knew these waters, said that there'll be a storm again soon. And he was right. The very next day, a storm hit us. According to my calculations, during this storm, we were carried so far away that even the oldest sailor on board could not tell in what part of the world we were. Finally, after several stormy days, the weather became calm again. Luckily, the ship wasn't damaged, but we were driven nearly 2,000 kilometers east. None of us knew where we were, so the captain decided to continue sailing east. 2 weeks later, we saw an island, which I later learnt was called Borbdingnag. Vasco da Gama had found a new sea route to India in 1498. Soon after that, traders and travellers started coming to India. So, it was quite fashionable to write about journeys to India. Gulliver's ship, however, lost its way in a storm and landed in Borbdingnag, a fictitious island. The captain ordered some sailors to take a boat to the island to look for fresh water. I went along because I was interested in seeing a new country. Our men wandered on the shore to look for fresh water, and I walked alone about a mile towards the other side of the island. I saw that the country was all barren and rocky. While the sailors continued their search for a stream, I decided to take a walk. When I got back, I was surprised to see that the sailors were already in the boat and were rowing as fast as they could towards the ship. I was about to call out to them when I saw a huge creature chasing after them. I knew he wouldn't be able to catch them as they had almost reached the ship. I turned and ran away from him quickly. I entered a field with grass that was 7 meters high and with corn that was 13 meters high. It took me an hour to cross the field. The trees were much taller than usual. I tried to find a hole in the hedge so that I could get into the next field, when I saw a giant walking towards me, his footsteps thundering. I was struck with utmost fear and astonishment. I hid among the corn, hoping I wouldn't be seen. He was looking into the next field on the right. Just then the giant shouted, and other giants appeared. They came towards him with reaping hooks in their hands, and each hook was as big as 6 scythes. They were not as well dressed as the first giant. They began to cut the corn in the field where I hid. They slashed their blades through the crop as they came nearer to me. I crept back until I reached the part of the field that had earlier been destroyed in the rain. The stalks were so interwoven that I could not creep through, and the shreds of corn pierced through my clothes and into my flesh. Sadly, I lay down between 2 ridges and wished for death. I thought of my wife and children and regretted my decision of making the second voyage against the advice of my family and friends. I could not help but think of my time in Lilliput, where I was considered the greatest prodigy in the world by the tiny inhabitants. Now I could understand how they felt when I was there. After all the crop had been cut, I was discovered. I now felt like a Lilliputan. Suddenly I saw a huge foot coming down on me. I screamed as loud as I could, and the foot stopped in midair. The giant lifted his foot and stared at me. He picked me up with his thumb and finger. I feared for my life and thought he would dash me to the ground almost 60 feet below, like we do to any little hateful creatures that we want to kill. In these lines, the writer points out the human habit of killing tiny insects or even bigger creatures out of fear or just to show our might. But to my good luck, he appeared pleased with my voice and gestures and walked over to where his master stood. Then he dropped me into his master's hand. I tried to talk to him politely, knowing that he wouldn't understand me. He then placed me lightly on the ground on all fours. But I got up immediately and walked slowly backwards and forwards to show them that I had no intention of running away. They all sat down in a circle around me to observe my movements. I pulled off my hat and made a low bow to the farmer. The farmer picked me up and he spoke to me, but the sound of his voice pierced my ears like that of a watermill. I answered as loud as I could in several languages, and he bent down to hear me properly. This was, however, all in vain, for we could not understand what each other said. The farmer realized that I was an intelligent being and not an animal. He took out his handkerchief, doubled it, and spread it on his left hand. He placed this hand flat on the ground with the palm upward and made me a sign to step into it. This I could easily do, for it was not above a foot in thickness. I thought it was best to obey, and as I was afraid that I might fall, I laid myself full length on the handkerchief. He wrapped the rest of the handkerchief around my head, and he carefully put me in his pocket and carried me home. When I was shown to the giant's wife, she shrieked, but she quickly got used to me and was kind to me. The whole family sat down for dinner. There was a huge plate of meat on the table. The farmer put me on the table and cut a small piece of meat and gave it to me with a piece of bread. The farmer and his wife were thrilled to see me eat with my own little knife and fork. As I was walking across the table towards the farmer, his boy picked me up by the legs and held me so high that I started trembling. The farmer took me carefully and hit the boy hard on the head because I knew how cruel children are to small animals. I didn't want the boy to take revenge on me. So I pleaded the father not to hit the boy anymore. Suddenly, I heard a noise, like numerous machines running together. The next instant, a cat 3 times the size of our cows jumped on the table. The mistress held it in her arms so that it wouldn't come after me. I instinctively knew that life would be dangerous in Brobdingnag. After we ate, the farmer or master went back to the fields. I think he told his wife to look after me, for she took me to the bedroom and placed me on the enormous bed. Then she went out and locked the door. I was so exhausted that I fell asleep. When I woke up, I saw 2 huge rats running towards me. They were as big as dogs. They bared their teeth at me viciously. I took out my sword and killed one of them. The other got frightened and ran away. When the mistress walked into the room, I showed her the dead rat. She was glad that I was safe and threw the animal away. The mistress had a daughter of about 9. I owe that girl my life, for she took good care of me. She was given the responsibility of looking after me. I was with her always, and she saved me from many dangerous situations. She made me many new outfits, as well as a small bed that she kept on a hanging high shelf so that the rats couldn't get to me. The best thing she did was to teach me her language. In a few days, I could call for whatever I wanted to. I called her Glummelklitch or Little Nurse. She gave me the name of Grildrig, which means mannequin in English. Mannequin is a little man or dwarf. Soon, all of the farmer's neighbors came to see the little creature he found in the field. One of them looked at me through his glasses. His eyes looked like moons, and I found it funny. I laughed out loud, making him angry. He turned to the farmer and advised him to show me around town to make money. This made Glummelklitch cry. "Don't worry, Glummelklitch," I consoled her. "I don't mind being shown off. I must do as your father says." I was also hoping I'd find a way to escape and return home. We travelled by horse the next day. Glummelklitch put me in a box punched with holes for air. When we arrived at the marketplace, the master hired the biggest room in the public house and placed me on the table. Glummelklitch stayed close to me to make sure no one harmed me. I was told to talk in their language, to pull out my sword, to drink from a cup, and all other things. On that day, I saw over 300 people. His plan was so successful that he arranged for me to be shown the next day too. This I didn't look forward to, as I was quite tired with the previous day's events. For the next few days, I had to force myself to walk and talk to the crowd. When we visit the zoo, some people joke that the animals think we are the exhibits and they are the spectators. Here, Gulliver, a human being like us, has become an exhibit for the huge people, just because he is different. My master realized that he could make a fortune by showing me around the country. We made our journey to the capital, and Glummelklitch accompanied us as usual. There, the Queen saw us and invited us to the palace. She was so pleased with me that she asked if I'd like to live in the palace. "My Queen," I answered, "I must do as my master says. But if I were free, I would spend my whole life at your service." The Queen quickly bought me from the master, and he was happy to get such a good price for it. I begged the Queen to let Glummelklitch stay with me, as she took good care of me. The Queen agreed. When the master took the money and left, the Queen asked me, "Why didn't you say goodbye? Why do you hate him?" Ever since he found me, my master used me to make easy money, I replied. He made me work so hard that I began to feel ill. He only sold me because he thinks I'm dying. Many people sell off their cows, pets, or abandon them when they are sick, old, or of no use to them. But to speak honestly, I feel so much better in your company and in this place, Your Highness. The Queen was surprised to hear such words coming from this creature. She took me to her husband. When the king saw me, he thought I was a toy, but he was astonished when I spoke to him. At first, he didn't believe me when I told him that my country was different, with millions like me. But when he spoke to Glummelklitch and questioned me again, he did. They took very good care of me. The king's workers made a special bedroom filled with furniture for me. They even put a lock for the door so that no rats would get in. The Queen was so fond of me that she made sure I sat beside her when we ate. My plates, knives, and forks were also made to my size. The king often ordered for me to be brought in my box and set on the table in his room. He would then command me to bring one of my chairs and sit down within 3 yards distance upon the top of the cabinet, which brought me close to his face. This is how I had several conversations with him. The king loved to hear about my country, its laws, and great buildings. He would listen politely when I rambled about my country. Rambled means talked in length or detail. Then turn to his advisers and remark, "How funny that an insect should talk of such matters. He thinks his country is developed." I was shocked at what I heard. They were laughing at my beautiful country, famous for its royalty, its brave and honest people. And I couldn't say a word to him after that. The king had given strict orders that if at any time another ship like mine appeared, it would be brought ashore along with its crew and passengers. He was keen to find a mate for me and expected me to breed. But I would have rather died than undergone the disgrace of being kept in a cage like an animal. I was, however, treated with much kindness and was the favourite of the king and queen and the delight of the whole court. Read the whole story. The original book may contain very old English, not easy to follow, but the abridged version are easy to read. In describing different and unusual lands and people, the writer brings out the good and bad of different countries and cultures. One of the most entertaining and classic stories, the first part, Gulliver and the Lilliputians, has been adapted for many film versions. Though the story is a simple tale of Gulliver's adventures in a land of tiny people, it has many underlying comments on the political and social situation of those days. Even if we do not understand them or relate to them now, the story is still interesting and amusing. In the third part, he is stranded on the Laputa Islands near Japan. Here, the people throw rocks downhill at other people who rebel against them, much like we use weapons in warfare. In the fourth part, he goes to the country of the Houyhnhnms. Try pronouncing this. Their talking horses rule over a race of deformed humans called Yahoos.